everybody. It's the Rob from 106.1. See, now I'm looking. Now I'm looking for what's happening in the bottom right corner. Has that been going on for a while?
Yes.
So it's the Rob from 106.1 Kiss FM here with my tag team partner in podcasting, the Repo Man, Jerry Valeri. So how long has this been going on for that I've been unaware of it?
It's been on and off. It isn't like a weekly thing, and but like this week, I got mad at my chair sometimes. Like at the last minute, someone will come in, and I'll be going like this, but you never catch it because you're doing the intro, and I'm in the bottom right-hand corner. You never see it.
Yeah, and I think when I watch them back, a lot of times there's like an ad over that square, so I just never noticed that you're doing weird stuff at the top of the show. Good morning, everybody.
It's an Easter egg. Suck it.
Yeah, I'm going to go back and have to watch some of the intros of the previous shows that we've done.
By the way, that's one of my favorite gimmicks ever, the suck it gimmick. It was just like all of a sudden that was a gimmick.
Well, I mean, that was something that certainly, was a like a prelude to the Attitude Era, was pointing to your crotch and telling people what to do with it.
And I'm interested to see today how we define gimmick, what we look at as a gimmick, because is it when they're a costume or a character, or is it a personality trait? You know, like, would you say that Steve Austin with the middle fingers and the beer cans was a gimmick?
Oh, yeah. So let's let everyone know that today the topic is we're going to be talking about gimmicks, the best gimmicks, the worst gimmicks, gimmicks that exceeded their potential, gimmicks that failed to live up to their potential. This one was submitted by Steve on a post show on Tuesday's episode. So thanks, Steve, for the idea. I feel like a gimmick is any big, notable personality point to your on-screen character, whether it is real or not to your real-life counterpart.
So definitely eating worms is a gimmick.
Absolutely, as is giving a middle finger. I mean, since Steve Austin, I'm sure he did that in his real life too, so it doesn't need to be necessarily fake. It just needs to be part of your on-screen character, part of your wrestling's character. That's a pretty big, plot point, I feel like.
Right.
So, gonna be plenty to talk about. I mean, wrestling is a gimmick-ridden industry, especially in the past. The days of the gimmicks are largely behind us, although there's still some stragglers for sure.
But it's not as obvious as it was, and it's certainly not as racist. Oh.
That's a pretty good point, I suppose.
I mean, you look at you just look at some of the names, and so you couldn't. I don't think you can get away with calling someone Chief J Strongbow now. I just don't. I really don't.
No, well, you know what, boy, that's a good question.
Not that offends me, but I think that some people, PC warriors would be upset about that kind of thing.
Well,
And I mean, even Mr. Fuji.
I was about to say, Mr. Fuji's whole character was pretty much just an over-the-top Japanese stereotype.
That's all of them. One that came to mind when I was on this track, I was thinking of like some of the ones that are really race related. Like, what about, remember Mohammad Ahsan, and they made him a terrorist?
Absolutely, yeah.
Holy smokes.
Yeah, but you know what? Maybe that wasn't. I don't know what to think about that one. Like, are we not if a movie does a character that's a terrorist, it's not a big deal. Can't wrestling do it or not?
I don't know. That's a great question. Obviously they can't because they got rid of it. And I was one of the few people that actually liked the Muhammad Hassan character. I liked where they were going with it.
Because that was kind of when I was a senior at college, so like 04, 05, you'd kind of come over to my place and watch Raw. I feel like that was kind of when you started getting back into wrestling.
Right.
And I remember you reacting big to Muhammad Hassan.
Yeah. That was a gimmick that a lot of people didn't like, that I didn't mind. I didn't mind it at all.
Around that time, there was another controversial gimmick going on. Do you know which one I'm talking about?
Eugene.
Good call. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, around that time, they did a character played by Nick Dinsmore, who was, can we say retarded?
Mentally handicapped. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what kind of listeners you have. I trust the Post to Post universe
But if you're
to
using
not,
if you're using it literally, though, is it offensive? I don't know.
I don't know, man. I had somebody complain to the radio station last week saying he keeps saying retarded on the air, and I was talking about flame retardant child seats. So
That's your new gimmick.
I never know who I'm dealing with.
Well, okay. His character was special needs, mentally handicapped, but when he got in the ring, between the bell, he was portrayed as like a savant.
Yeah.
And boy, you know what? When I'm looking at whether or not that gimmick exceeded its potential or failed to live up to its potential, I would say it would probably fall somewhere in the middle, in that it could have been a longer running thing that maybe could have grown a little bit. But at the same time, that could have flopped really hard, and Nick did a really good job doing it.
A lot of credit, I think, should go to Nick Dinsmore for how well he did with that, because I think that's the kind of gimmick that can kill you.
Absolutely. And boy, well, so I guess the two that jump out at me the most as so here, there's two I wanted to talk about right at the start, because these are really great examples of gimmicks that, when pitched, you would think would be a fart in church, but the people who portrayed the characters embraced them and made them larger than life, transcending the generations, and have already stood the test of time. And I do believe that they are two of the best gimmicks in wrestling.
All right. I know what one of them is, and I agree it's the best. I can't figure out what the second one's going to be.
What's the first one?
Undertaker.
The Undertaker is absolutely right. When you think of the best gimmick, that's what comes to mind first. Because Undertaker is acting, you know, when he's portraying the entertainment part of sports entertainment. He doesn't really, you know, he's not dead. He's not walking. He had to change his move set to represent his character. So,
if he was dead, he wouldn't need 4 hip replacements.
Although he did look dead on Ric Flair's 30 for 30. I don't know if you watched that or not.
Yeah, I did. That was good.
Yeah, we'll talk about that maybe next week a little bit when we have a recap episode. But let's so the Undertaker, it was a commitment. Although there was a few years where he strayed from the character, which really drove me nuts. That's my biggest complaint about this amazing character.
American Badass. That
they completely abandoned it for the American Badass gimmick. That drove me nuts. Hated it.
I really like the Undertaker, the Ministry Undertaker.
Yeah, but that still was consistent with his character evolved. It evolved,
and I like that. I'm just saying I like that one version of the Undertaker character. I like the original one that came out at Survivor Series, and I really like the Ministry one. You're right. Like the Undertaker on a motorcycle, I don't know why they did it, other than I think he didn't want to feel cheesy in the Attitude Era.
Yeah, that's true. That, there was a whole movement of realism happening, and that was something he wanted to be a part of, I guess. But man, it did no favors, in my opinion. So that was an example of someone who I really think that if you gave that gimmick to anybody else, it just wouldn't have worked. So you don't know the second one? I'm a little surprised.
I can't quite figure out what the second one is. Go ahead and give it to me.
A close second, in my opinion, for best gimmicks ever. And I use that because of this character's longevity. Again, the absurd nature of the character, yet a commitment to portraying him, is Goldust.
Okay. I was afraid you were going to say Kane, because I was going to disagree with you.
Yeah, no, it's not Kane. We can talk about Kane in a second. Goldust, again, he's had that same iconic theme song since the very beginning, the distinct look from the beginning. And again, one that evolved. It's not, his character is somewhat unrecognizable to the kind of homosexual movie quoting Goldust of 1996.
But I did love that version, and when he and Terry would come out, and Terry was his manager, and I loved all of that.
Yeah. So, and again, a commitment. Again, the character changed, it evolved, but it wasn't like a drastic swerve off the course, like Undertaker had or something like that. So, when you think of Gimmicks, that's one of the big ones that pops into my head.
But it's easy to forget that he was like a main player too. You know, like you go back, you watch some of those In Your Houses. He's fighting for the world championship, and now he's losing on house shows to R-Truth. So it's just different.
And when you watch those In Your Houses and you see the things that he's doing, the mouth to mouth to Ahmed Johnson, the way he would touch Razor Ramon, and the actual real life feud that led to, it was super duper edgy for the new generation.
Absolutely.
So that was, to me, another one I'm going to give 2 thumbs up to, because a lot of people would have been probably dying to get out of that gimmick, and Goldust is like, let's just knock it out the park.
Let's make some hay, you know. And if we're going to do that, if we're going to say you give somebody a bad gimmick or what should be a bad gimmick, and they make it work for however long, then I think that we should give some credit to Akeem the African Dream.
For real?
I do, because he made it work. He's a white dude from Middle America, the one-man gang, and they put that goofy hat on him and the stupid thing, and he's dancing now. And I watched wrestling when he was big, and it worked. It wasn't unbelievable to me. It was okay. Is it the best gimmick ever? No, it's not. It's a terrible gimmick, but he made it work. So I'll give him credit for that. I'll give him credit for making it work.
Along those lines, I would give a bit more love to a former tag team partner of his. What about the commitment portrayed by the Big Boss Man?
Hey, well, let's take a trip down to Cobb County, Georgia.
Well, and not only that, this gimmick could have been very basic, but he brought a life to it through a commitment to a character that not a lot of people could have. Okay, so I mean, when you think about like occupations, which that was in the occupation time, like, you know, where everyone had to have some sort of second job, and you're so committed to that job that you can't even take the uniform off when you go to wrestle. I think that most people would have played a cop in a more boring manner, but whether good guy or bad guy, what was his name? Ray Traylor would really breathe a life into the Big Boss Man. And also when he would go to WCW, who didn't have the rights to the Big Boss Man, he was just Big Bubba,
but he was dressed up like a SWAT guy. Like, that was good.
It was, to me, I could never escape that was the Big Boss Man. It didn't matter what name they called him. To me, it was just a weird looking Big Boss Man.
Yeah.
And then again, they even brought him back. And when you think about how long his career lasted in the WWE, I mean, it was I want to say the early 2000s when he went away. He evolved, and when he had the black fatigues on, he was a different character, but still the same. God bless him.
Yeah, he really made hay out of that thing, and that's what you got from a lot of those guys. The Honky Tonk Man, I think, is the best of the guitar wielders. Like, okay. I mean, you'll have guitar wielding singers. You've had it. That's a gimmick. It's been done since the beginning of time, but no one's done it better than the Honky Tonk Man. And I think it's because that guy's just a natural heel.
Even better than Elias.
Just a little. I don't walk with Elias as much as I'd walk with the Honky Tonk Man.
Honky Tonk Man was another great example. Here's the gimmick. The gimmick is you're an Elvis impersonator. And actually, in the very beginning, it was a babyface Elvis impersonator, no less. But that's the gimmick. And you would think that this is just so absurd, this will never hit. But you gave it to, I know this guy's name, Wayne Ferris. You give it to Wayne Ferris, and he lived the life, man. He lived the life of Elvis, and thinking he was great, and thanking the audience when they clearly weren't cheering for him. Like, that was little subtle things that just knocked this out of the park.
Yeah, he's breaking Jake the Snake's neck. I mean, he was doing great stuff. And Jimmy Mouth of the South Heart, he gets credit for helping too, because that dude brought a ton of heat.
Hey, what about I thought, now, boy, this is another one where it's like, you could argue it exceeded its potential. You could argue it didn't live up to its potential, or you could say it was right where it needed to be. But I do think a gimmick that was brilliantly done, whether you're talking about the writing or the portrayal, I think the $1 Million Man needs a lot of love.
Absolutely. And now that I know from listening to Something to Wrestle with Bruce Pritchard, that the $1 Million Man was basically Vince McMahon. Now I see why he was so flushed out. Like the character, there was a lot more depth to the $1 Million Man than you would think by just looking at it at first. And now I see why.
This was the time when you had to be your gimmick 24/7, and McMahon made it very clear, and he was happy to bankroll this. You are the $1 Million Man all the time. So if
you pick up the tabs,
and you leave that $100 tip. You know, if you go to the gas station to get a soda, you pay with a $100 bill. You tell them to keep the change. You are the $1 Million Man at all times. If someone is bothering you with their cigarette, you offer them $500 to put that cigarette out. Pronouns, pal.
It's what a great gimmick to get. I mean, he didn't have to worry about travel or anything. He flew him in first class, and he had limos to the arena, and everybody else is schlubbing around in coach and trying to save money, and everything was paid for Ted DiBiase because he was the $1 Million Man.
But he looked the part, and also, like, the way things were written around the $1 Million Man were really well done. Like, for example, this is a really unique character in that, first of all, the wrestling audience, or people in general, they hate people who flaunt their wealth. They just hate it. And here's a guy with dollar signs on his suit, like, so that's just great. He had the seasonal residence whenever he was introduced. What I want when I think of a character like this, if I'm writing him, I'm going to write a character who doesn't necessarily win the WWE title. I think of a character who buys the WWE title, and that's what he did.
Or pays Andre the Giant to win it.
Or buys wrestlers and sells wrestlers and has a butler or a bodyguard or both. Like, it was just really well done.
Yeah.
I say it may not have lived up to his potential because he never won the title, but I feel like it was really well done. Like, I wouldn't change anything, I guess.
And then you have guys, we've talked a lot about the gimmicks that are profession gimmicks, but then you've got the ones where, like, I don't know who said, like, okay, so you're going to be really pro-America, but you're going to carry a 2x4. That's your gimmick. Like, that's not a gimmick. That's not how did that become a gimmick? Or you're going to put on sunglasses, you're going to come out in a robe, and you're not Ric Flair, but you're going to be crazy. You're the Macho Man Randy Savage. Like, they're gimmicks that you couldn't, I don't know how they explained them to somebody at first.
I don't know that those were, those two that you just mentioned, I'm not positive those were gimmicks that were pitched by a writing team. I think that those were just the traits that the Macho Man and Hacksaw exuded. I think that was just who they wanted to be, and that's what they became. So a gimmick might be a weird word for those characteristics, I think. Right.
You could call the snake a gimmick. That was one of the best gimmicks ever, is having a snake in a bag.
And then, but again, to complete the gimmick, to act snake-like.
Do you think that's why a lot of those kind of gimmicks don't go like they used to? Because the wrestlers aren't living the gimmicks anymore. It's not like the vaudevillains were outside of the arena.
I think that's part of it. The big part to me is that, so we mentioned the Attitude Era, and that became the birth of the reality characters. In the 80s, and that time that we're talking about, the rock and wrestling era, it was very much Saturday morning cartoon presentation.
Yeah, those dudes were on my ice cream cones.
Yeah, and the wrestling buddies, like the snakes sell dolls. Kevin Owens isn't really a gimmick per se. That's in the 80s, you needed it to look attention grabbing and different and like a cartoon, and that's what wrestling did really, really well. They were real life He-Men.
You're a prize fighter. You need boxing gloves. Come to the ring in boxing gloves.
Right. So that's,
we're going to call you Mr. Boxing.
Number 2. So yeah, that was that was a good question too about, you know, what, like, because there were eras of gimmicks. Like I said, there was the Saturday morning cartoon era, and then you had the edgy, realistic era, and then you had the PG era, and now you have like kind of just a millennium era where people are just kind of themselves and don't really have a whole lot of gimmicks. And it's
here's a question for you, because I know you're a huge fan of Bruce Pritchard, and he just did an entire podcast on this one character.
Well, you know.
Some people think it's the worst character of all time. He thinks it's one of the best gimmicks of all time, and the gimmick itself should go into the Hall of Fame. I tend to agree. I've always liked it. What do you think about Doink the Clown?
Boy, Doink is another definition of a gimmick. And that's a really good point, that I don't know that any individual who portrayed him should be in for that gimmick, but the gimmick itself is fantastic. That's another, it's so like, this character had so many different facets. I love that it debuted as a heel, which is actually very surprising to someone who started watching wrestling in the summer of '94, because Doink was such a definitive babyface. He had dink. He would pie the bad guys. He would spray the bad guys with water. He was such a good guy. And then you go back and you watch tapes from just a year before, and he's such a bad guy, popping kids' balloons and attacking baby faces with props.
I liked him more as a heel, but that, you know.
Agreed. Yeah. And I wish that the character would have lasted longer, but even when it transitioned to a baby face, still fun to watch. And he would recur again, like even again, mentioning Nick Dinsmore. Nick Dinsmore even portrayed Doink for a limited period of time. Brooklyn Brawler, Steve Lombardi, Matt Bourne, and there's several more who portrayed the character because the gimmick didn't need to be linked to a specific person.
No,
there was even 2 that would appear at once on WrestleMania 9, or you had 4 of the little guys running around at Survivor Series 9.
Well, you had Steve Kern playing him forever as the second Doink, and Steve Kern, known also as Skinner, who would come around with chew spit running down his beard.
Now, to be fair, we don't know that was a second Doink. It could have been an illusion. Because wrestling.
I don't know why everyone doesn't just love wrestling. I just don't understand it.
Hold on, my headphones have popped out of my slot. Give me a second, bud.
But like Skinner, I think of Repo Man. Like, there were some bad ones. I mean, sure, there were tons of bad ones. Remember when they gave Kevin Nash the Wizard of Oz thing? Holy smokes.
That was obviously before he became a star as Diesel. Yeah, he had Oz. Didn't he have another wonky one? I don't
know.
remember.
No, but maybe. But remember when Kane went from being a dentist to being fake Diesel, and then he finally gets Kane, which sounds just as ridiculous, but then works.
Yeah, the Isaac Yankem dentist, and that was also around the same time as TL Hopper was plunging toilets. Why anyone, like, think about the logic here.
By the way, I looked for my Not a Rib shirt today. It would have been perfect to wear my Not a Rib shirt with all the gimmicks all over it, but I couldn't find it.
So TL Hopper is a plumber, and he so loves his job that even when he comes to wrestle, he brings the plunger with him and wears what he wears while plumbing, which was just like a wife beater and jeans. And to think that any plumber would show up wearing that is even absurd. But nay, welcome to the new generation.
I play hockey, you see? So I'm going to come out with ice skates, and you're going to call me the Goon.
Hey, I'm a trash man. And I love emptying the freaking trash so much, I'm going to affix the dumpster to my name.
That's the thing. It's, you know, it's there's so many contradictions. You know, Bruce was talking about how Vince would, when he would scout talent, he'd say, "Can you see him headlining WrestleMania?" And I get that. Like, can you see this guy? That's what we want to bring in, people that have the potential to headline WrestleMania. But do you really see the Repo Man headlining WrestleMania? No, you don't. Like, some of these gimmicks are just ridiculous. And I have a hard time thinking outside of The Undertaker and a few others of people that were given terrible gimmicks that actually became anything other than, you know, like The Godfather was never going to main event anything. He was going to come out with his hose, and that was going to be it. That was his gimmick. But, you know, Val Venus was a porn star, but he wasn't going to main event anything. I don't know. Sometimes I think the ones that really do the main eventing are the ones like Macho Man and Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels and even Hulk Hogan to a degree, where it's more of just an exaggeration of their personality and not, you're going to be a florist. You're going to be a florist and you're going to win a main event.
Well, but also, so you're definitely right that, you know, Bruce has talked about that's one of Vince McMahon's litmus tests is can they main event WrestleMania? But I can think of many examples where that's not true. And I'll just offer the mentality that wrestling is a buffet and everyone has their spot. Like Ellsworth. I mean, Ellsworth has his spot on the card.
Yes, he does.
Yeah, and doesn't, you know, you're never going to see him. But you need enhancement level stuff. You need comedy stuff. You need females. And so I don't think with every hire, they apply that same litmus test. I think for a majority of them, that's a pretty good rule of thumb. I think for some of them, though, they've got their spots to fill. Know what I mean?
What other gimmicks are you thinking? We've spent a lot of time in the 80s. I feel like that's where a lot of the gimmicks were.
Well, the 90s are certainly easy for me. We mentioned TL Hopper, the dumpster. What about Adam Bomb? I forget. He was from 3 Mile Island, so obviously you call him Adam Bomb, right?
And he's got those goggles, those Mad Max goggles.
Yeah, I mean, so this was someone who, you know, was probably in some sort of, I don't even remember what his backstory was. Was he was born near 3 Mile Island, probably around the time of the blast, and boy, I don't even remember how the whole thing worked.
I think that's pretty much all they wrote.
I remember also late in the new generation, especially around the summer and fall of 1997. In fact, Survivor Series 97 was even dubbed Gang Wars because there were many faction gimmicks. For example, the DOA. And this to me was a low point in wrestling. I didn't care about these factions. It's not that I don't like factions. I love factions. But
what about the Nation of Domination? That was a good faction.
That was good, but DOA wasn't. The Truth Commission wasn't. The Los Boricuas weren't. You know, other gimmick factions from later on in the Attitude Era, you had things like the Oddities. They were gimmicked. They were gimmicks coming out of their gimmicks.
They had like some of them had 3 gimmicks. Like,
you know, I mean,
one guy was wearing a Cartman shirt and a Leatherface mask. Like, I'm like, what are you doing?
With a bump on his head that was supposed to move every time he wrestled. Like, the bump would be on the top right one day and then the back left the other day, but didn't work out that way.
Oh my goodness.
Tenta himself has portrayed several gimmicks like Earthquake. He had what was it, Golga? He had
I liked Earthquake and Typhoon.
The Shark.
What about Tugboat?
Oh, what about Shockmaster?
That's even better.
How about some WCW tried to do a legit thing with RoboCop? Remember that?
Yes.
Or what about the Ding Dongs?
Yeah, we're picking on the WWF a lot here. We could look at the WCW and really go to town.
The Ding Dongs were a team that had bells on them.
Oh my God.
And their backs were hunched, so they literally couldn't be pinned.
You see, they ding and they dong.
The Ding Dongs. See, you get what we did there. You get
Remember the radioactive turtles? What were those? What were they called?
The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles?
Yeah, but they did a turtle one in WWE.
James Ellsworth?
No.
It was a turtle in WWE. I need to know what you're talking about. Turtle?
Turtles. Hold on.
Turtles.
WWF Turtles. Oh, stupid World Wildlife Federation. You know what I mean?
Turtles?
Shit, yes.
I want to make sure that
Toxic Turtles. The Toxic Turtles.
Toxic Turtles?
You don't remember that? Bruce even talked about the Toxic Turtles, and he was like, yeah, they were like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles were really famous at the time, so we're going to do the Toxic Turtles, and they would come out, and if one would get on his back and then he couldn't get up, and they'd have to help him up. You don't remember the Toxic Turtles? I think Lombardi was one of them.
Hold on. How many era was this?
Oh, Dwayne Gill was one of them. Dwayne Gill was one of the Toxic Turtles.
Jer, I don't. Holy cow!
Do you see it?
Yeah, you're kind of blowing my mind right now.
That's a pretty great gimmick, isn't it?
And this is way later than I was expecting. Like, holy cow! Wow.
Yeah.
All right. Well, learn something new every day.
There it is.
I wasn't prepared for that this morning. Throw that one in your Google machine if you're not familiar with the Toxic Turtles. They were literally, I mean, they're bad Ninja Turtle ripoffs. I mean, that is bad looking.
Yeah, it looks like somebody you'd see it in Times Square posing for pictures.
And it also seems way late to be jumping on the Ninja Turtle train. Like, this looks like maybe 93, 94-ish.
Yeah, I've got a GIF here where one gets stuck on his back. He's carrying his partner has to come in and save him and roll him onto his front.
Around this time, there was a character named Fantasio, which has become interesting to me. He was a magician wrestler who didn't last very long. But so there's a magician here in Evansville, a very popular magician named Don Baggett, who's been on my show a few times. And it's kind of the guy I've become friends with, behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And he toured with the WWE for several months, teaching Fantasio magic tricks, and he would teach things for the character to do in the ring. And he's got some really cool stories, around that time. We're talking like 94, 95-ish. Yeah, really, really cool stuff, from the world of magic. What? I just saw a picture of Earthquake as the shark because it's been a while since I saw the shark. Yeah.
These are ridiculous. Brutus the Barber Beefcake, that one's ridiculous.
BTFBB.
You got it.
ECW wasn't safe either. ECW had some gimmicks going on, didn't they?
Sure they did. I'm sure they did. But they made them work. Like, think how ridiculous the Dudley Boy gimmick is.
The whole family.
The whole family. Like, not even what it is now, but what it was. You had Sign Guy Dudley. You had Spike. They came out and Bubba was stuttering, and then all of a sudden they just don't look tough at all, and they're wearing tie dye, and the next thing you know, they're insulting everybody in the crowd, and they're killing people, and you're like, well, these guys this is great.
They were fun. There was something fun about the damn Dudleys.
Those damn Dudleys. Well, do you remember when Mike Awesome was the fat chick Thriller?
Kind of, yeah.
That was his moniker, the fat chick Thriller. And he'd come to the ring with fat girls.
Look, if you've never portrayed that gimmick, raise your hand. I mean, everyone's portrayed that gimmick at some point in their life. Anything else you want to mention before we wrap this one up? Thanks.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, is there any other? I'm sure we're missing a million gimmicks that were wonderful and terrible.
We can't name all of them.
Well, this is where the post show comes into play. In the universe, we need you.
Yeah.
Tell us the ones we didn't talk about, or post pictures of the Toxic Turtles.
Or if the comments just turn into GIFs and photos of the Toxic Turtles, I'm totally cool with that.
And it might.
Do you know what were they like, Leonardo and Donatello kind of names?
I don't know. I never remembered them on TV. I only remembered them because Bruce Pritchard talked about them and was shooting on them. And then I found out Dwayne Gill was one of the Toxic Turtles.
That makes total sense, by the way. That makes total sense. If it were Gill and Lombardi, that would make perfect sense. All right, man. Let's wrap this one up then. Thank you for your help, and a big thanks to Steve for suggesting another fun topic that I really feel like this one's not done in that I feel like the conversation is just about to begin on the post show.
My gimmick is going to be, I'm not going to answer you.
Oh, okay. Well, nailing it. The gimmick, your new gimmick is the bottom right corner every start of the show.
Start of the show. That's my gimmick. Who knows what it's going to be? Maybe next time it'll be me eating lollipops.
You never know with Jerry Valeri, that toxic turtle him. For myself, The Rob, my tag team partner in podcasting, Jerry Valeri, we will catch you on Tuesday with a Raw recap right here on 1061evansville.com.
It's not often we stump you on wrestling, Toxic Turtles.